With immense pleasure that I now introduce the guest of honor, Professor Zakir Hameed. Tan Sri Zakir bin Abdul Hameed is a highly accomplished figure in the field of science with a diverse career spanning research, education, administration, and diplomacy. Recognized for his contributions, he was awarded the prestigious federal honorific title Tan Sri by Malaysia's head of state in 2014. He held significant roles, including serving as the founding chair at the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and as the science advisor to Malaysia's Prime Minister, and also as a member of the UN Secretary General's Scientific Advisory Board. Moreover, he held key positions such as co-chair of Malaysia's Global Science and Innovation Advisory Council, chair of the National Professors Council, and chair of various prominent organizations. I would now like to invite our guest of honor, Professor Zakir Hameed, the chair of INSA Southeast Asia Network, to address the gathering.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that generous introduction. I'm very delighted and honored to be here. Let me address Professor Nadira, President of the Sri Lankan National Academy of Sciences, my dear colleague, Professor Remy Piron. I'm sure he's still on board. I'm not sure he's left. But in the interest of time, and also I noted that I have another slot tomorrow morning for a presentation. I'll try to be brief. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are discussing over the next 2 days would be science advice to governments. I've been introduced to this subject many years ago. In fact, 30 years ago, when I was a younger person, very comfortable in the university in Kuala Lumpur. That was when I was co-opted as the technical advisor to the negotiation of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity in Nairobi 30 years ago. And coming from the university, right at the end of the first day, I took enough courage to walk up to my head of delegation, the ambassador, and I told her, Madam Ambassador, I think I wanted to go home. She looked at me amused and a bit upset, and she asked me, what's the matter with you? And I said, I'm not familiar with this kind of environment. The delegates from 200 countries would meet in the plenary for 1 hour, and then they would retire to the delegates' lounge. And I said, and they would come back after 1 hour, after several hours, come back to the plenary and meet very briefly. So coming from the university, I'm not used to that. This ambassador told me, Professor, give yourself a few more days. And ladies and gentlemen, that was 30 years ago. Because it was in the delegates' lounge, or like here, where horses were traded, negotiations were made. When the diplomats come back to the plenary hall, it's just to gavel the agreement. The second thing, ladies and gentlemen, when you talk about rising to the global challenges like climate change, biodiversity loss, and now plastic pollution, all those global challenges of sustainability are embedded in science. So that is why what we are doing here today is crucial, embedded in science. The reason being, not to say we do not have enough knowledge that we do not have enough scientific facts. The reason being, more often than not, we scientists are not really able to talk the language of the policymakers and the diplomats. So hence, as Remy was saying just now, the science policy nexus is important. And to me, I think the science policy nexus is the last piece of the jigsaw that would connect the scientific community with the politician and the policymakers. Too often, we come up with good reports and all that, but it hasn't gone really to its impactful consequence. So it's very important to do that. And we have seen in terms of climate change, for example, it's not really the negotiation of the delegates to the annual meetings, but bodies like the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They are the ones who influence and connect the scientific community and the policymakers and politicians. And the same thing with biodiversity loss, what is known as the IPBES, Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, connecting the scientific community with the policy makers. So those are in terms of the global challenges. And today, with the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, sure, the knowledge is embedded with members of the academy or the academics in the university, but it needs to translate into a narrative that will be understood by those who make policy. If not, we would be left behind. So in a sense, one example of the absence of science, I think many years ago, when we have the Boxing Day tsunami in Aceh, remember? And your country, Sri Lanka, was badly affected. And one of the reasons for that is the failure of science to advise the policymakers, or the failure of science to establish the infrastructure, advance notice of tsunamis, which we have been had. Of course, learning from that terrible catastrophe, we now have this early warning system. To me, that is another aspect of science advice. And eventually, ladies and gentlemen, science advice or science policy nexus also relate to what I call science diplomacy. Science diplomacy is the dialogue between two or more countries in trying to solve a certain problem. And here, I think the science advice play a big role. I hope also during this two-day meeting, you could reflect on the kind of science diplomacy that we could forge on. All the same, as Remy was saying, the two elements of science policy nexus is to build capacity, which is very important, in particular to countries like Sri Lanka. That is also, Professor, I came here because it's organized in Sri Lanka. I know Remy Kuron couldn't be here, Peter Bergman couldn't be here. I'm here because I feel for the plight of us in developing countries, because the knowledge base is still in the global north. And it's a very noble effort that you would bring this to the global south. I know because from experience, I've learned in negotiation, we were really hard pressed. We had our backs to the wall because most of the time we were not backed by our scientists. We just don't have it. But countries like the US, there are a battery of science advisors behind the chief negotiator. The same thing with the European Union. The same thing with the UK. So it's about time. I think this aspect of capacity building or knowledge building among people in the global south needs to be upgraded. And that is one of the role of the science advice to governments. Maybe I should stop at that and continue tomorrow, just to say that it's a new field, really. For people in the Academy of Sciences, it's quite strange. And in those from universities, it's stranger. Because the academics were more interested in getting promoted, isn't it? Being associate or full professors. For that, they need to do research and publish. But what happened to that? Results is secondary. But I'm telling you tonight, that impact of your research is more crucial now than ever before. Yeah. So once again, let me congratulate Professor Nadira and her hardworking colleagues and other partners in the region embarking on this project, which I hope the beginning of better things in this part of the world. Thank you very much.